Daily Detroit is brought to you by the community. Support our work at patreon.com/dailydetroit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. I apologize. My voice is still a bit rough. We're on the mend because it's been very, very busy here in Daily Detroit land. Joining me on the line to talk about how busy we've been is none other than Fletcher Sharp. How are you, sir?
This weekend was a lot, because there's always, good and bad, but it was a lot.
Yeah, Ferndale Pride was wonderful. I mean, we did the policy conference, but you and I were together at Ferndale Pride with engineer Randy Cheyenne. What a joyous time. It was the 14th edition of the event. We've been there for I think 4 years now. I don't exactly remember, but so good to meet so many listeners. Really like a center of the Daily Detroit universe is Ferndale Pride.
Yeah, of course. Shouts out to Julia Music for running another successful, fun, and inclusive event like Ferndale Pride.
For sure. And if you didn't get a chance to say hi, I'm sorry, we missed you. You missed me wearing a captain's hat, a rainbow captain's hat, which, by the way, I got the most compliments on.
I mean, yeah, it was a pretty spiffy hat.
Yeah. All right, listen, people want to talk about the news. We're going to get into some stories around town and, of course, some sports. And I think the first thing that we're going to get into is there are rumors. Listeners are texting me things. This corroborates some reporting that I have done in the past, but I have not been willing to 100% lean in on. We did make this prediction with Devin O'Reilly. Downtown Detroit, the rumors seem to be downtown Detroit is about to get an Apple store. What are your thoughts, Fletcher?
Personally, great, because I really don't want to have to go all the way out to that really far outdoor mall to get my computer fixed. But in terms of, I guess, economically, where they're saying it's probably going to go, which is on Woodward by the Nike store and, Fendi and everything, where they're kind of putting in the newer types of stores, it makes sense. It would make sense, especially now that downtown Detroit's becoming more forward in terms of the stores they keep down there. And Apple Store is a good signifier that we're pushing for the next generation of people.
The thing is about an Apple Store is that's destination retail to me, because there are so few that exist out there, and there are a lot of people who would have to travel a long way. I think this is going to bring a lot of people in. There's no Apple stores downriver, I don't think. You got all the Grosse Points where, of course, there's Apple computers, but you talked about, I think it's Partridge Creek you're mentioning.
Yeah, you want to go to the Apple store, you got to go all the way out to Clinton Township.
Yeah, or Somerset or something, and that's a haul. So I think there's an audience to be had, and I think people will come to it and just, people love to browse at that stuff. Major cities have stores like this in their downtowns, and it really looks like Woodward specifically is becoming our version of a high street that has those kind of higher end retailers, whether it's on Woodward or just off the strip, like a Gucci.
I mean, honestly, Woodward is the perfect candidate for a street like that, because it does connect a lot of the major streets, and it is kind of the big runway from Detroit down to the rest of the Metro Detroit area. So I guess populating it with stores like this will definitely draw people in. We're going to have to figure out where they're going to have to park, but I mean...
And to be clear, this is not confirmed as of this recording when we are recording this. I've had multiple listeners talk to me about them seeing tables move in. So this isn't confirmed yet, but I feel I'm pretty confident that this could very well be a thing. And if it is, it feels like the timing couldn't be better, considering that the national spotlight is on Detroit with Michigan Central Station. We talked about that with Devin O'Reilly yesterday. But Fletcher, in the in-between time, that concert lineup has rolled out, and wow. It's
one of those things where you and I were talking off air, and I was just kind of I didn't realize, all these people would be here for this and everything of the sort. And you're yeah, stuff in the city's framed differently now. It kind of lets you realize, how we all love and view Detroit is now being the way that the rest of the country is starting to view and love the city as well.
Most definitely. Some of the acts I'm interested, look, there's acts everywhere all over this thing. Executive produced by Eminem, but you've got Common, which I love Common. You've got Melissa Etheridge. You've got Slum Village. You've got Jelly Roll. You've got Fantasia. You've got a bunch of sports stars that are doing MC stuff for this 90-minute stream thing. I am just stunned that it's not just local acts. I kind of assumed, there'd be some local stuff, But like, and I figured like maybe a Big Sean, maybe a Jack White, which nothing against them. They're great. But there is so much more than that to this.
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, you asked. I'm probably excited just to get maybe one or two Slum Village instrumentals on air while people are talking. But I mean, yeah, like Fantasia, Common, Melissa Etheridge. These are people that are not just known for the city or for the region. Like they're known nationally and to some degree even internationally. So for these people to now be a part of an event, not even like the draft, which is like about the city, but really more about the everyone coming to watch people get drafted. This is an event dedicated solely to the city of Detroit, just about the city of Detroit and like, development in the city of Detroit. So to get some international stars who are going to lend their time and themselves on camera is huge.
Yeah, I feel really lucky that I got RSVP'd in before this thing got released, man. I almost feel bad that I don't have more passes.
I mean, yeah, I heard of it. I did not realize it would be this big until we did some research for this story. So yeah, I kind of wish I had known how big it was a little bit earlier.
Now, you've been around the city a minute, as have I. How does something like this, we were talking about that framing. How does that make you feel about stuff? Because this is like a very different vibe. I feel like although there's been some challenges, we talked about the stuff with the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, other stuff. This year feels like a definite vibe shift in Detroit.
Again, as I've mentioned, and I'm sure some people know and feel the same way, like when you love the city, you love the city of Detroit, like no matter what people say, people want to make misguided Flint jokes, people want to talk about whatever they want to, sure, but like I love the city, and now it's starting to feel like not just the love you have for the city or like how highly you think of it, the rest of the region and the rest of the country is now like, yeah, this is the city, that we should be paying attention to. It feels kind of like a little bit, not the same way, a little bit like when I was growing up and like Detroit was like this big economic hub where if anyone mentioned a car, they're immediately talking about the city of Detroit. Now that's really not the case. Maybe in terms of like saying the Motor City, it feels good to hear the city talked about in positive ways as opposed to the ways we've been grown accustomed to hearing the past few years.
Speaking of things on the uptick, I feel like people heard you, Fletcher, about your pleas about bringing a WNBA team back to Detroit. Is actually one of our most popular episodes recently because there are a lot of people who just have a lot of nostalgia for the whole idea of the Detroit Shock and, frankly, the upswing of the WNBA. And you have some updates, man.
Who wouldn't want, to relive one of the best professional sports teams in this city? I think actually the last national championship the city of Detroit has is because of the Detroit Shock. So, I mean, you'd love to celebrate them. But yeah, the WNBA is seemingly thinking about after releasing a team in Toronto, they're thinking about bringing a team back to the city of Detroit, which would be great. A little bit of the drama comes in. Apparently, it's been reported that someone named Ryan Reed has the name Detroit Shock for his women's basketball league. So it's kind of like the G League for the WNBA. It's what he's trying to push across. But Sabria Whitaker, who follows the WNBA pretty closely, says that the trademark is pending for Mr. Reed. So we're not even sure exactly whether he has the name or not. I would love to see the Detroit Shock. Dallas Wings got to give back that history, but I'd love to see the Detroit Shock back in the WNBA. But if they can't get that name, it's not going to really make me be like, oh, no women's basketball. Like to see that game come back here, potentially play games in the city would be amazing, especially with the way it's kind of coming up now. I know people talk about Indiana Fevers, Caitlin Clark. You have Angel Reese, who plays for Chicago Sky, Cameron Brink with the LA Sparks. Just all these really well-known and well-profiled players, plus the players from before who were still there. You want to be a part of that. You don't want to get FOMO from something like that because those games can get pretty exciting as well.
So it's a nice to have, but not a must-have. The name.
I mean, I would think it's a must-have, but no, it's not necessarily a need. It's more of a want. But like, it's a pretty good want to have because who doesn't want that?
All right, let's wrap this up with some Pistons news. Troy Weaver, done as general manager. I think some fans are dancing in the streets. There needs to be, at least in my opinion, some pretty wholesale change with the Pistons. I'm kind of glad to see this happen because something needed to.
It's unfortunate. I got a few mean heckles in my Instagram DMs, a few mean tweets about, maybe not mean, but just prickly tweets about Troy Weaver being let go, because I was someone who's like, I've seen his body of work. I'm impressed. I kind of want to see what he can do. He's got some pieces that haven't been healthy. But after giving Monty Williams that big contract, like, if you can't start producing something better and instead you start backsliding to like you have one of the worst seasons in NBA history with the longest losing streak, it kind of sealed his own fate there. I knew when they brought in Trajan Langdon, who played at Duke, formerly of the New Orleans Pelicans, figured something was up. I know he helped build that super team with the Nets, with Kevin Durant. I know the Pelicans kind of got something going in terms of some young players down there. Nothing super spectacular, but they kind of have a nice core. He maybe could do that with the Pistons. I'm not really sure. Some other people might have to go, unfortunately. You'd like to think that he's not going to trade players like Cade. Cade's not going anywhere, but players like Cade, say Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Beef Stew. You'd hope that they don't see these players leave, but maybe some other shakeups are still coming. So I guess we'll have to see and put our faith in this Duke guy's hand.
I kind of feel like outside of Cade, anything's possible because, look, this ownership has got to do something. Their record is abysmal throughout their entire tenure.
Yeah, it's not great. And I mean, I'd love to say injuries matter, and they do matter, but you eventually have to shift and do something else.
Everybody gets injuries, right? Every team gets injuries. Not every team sits in the basement perennially.
Yeah, and it doesn't really help that, with the draft, they keep getting these picks that a bit lower than expected, but don't really pan out. And I know that kind of falls on the general manager as well to like make the proper choices. And clearly that was not the case with some of these players in fitting, despite the injuries. So it's unfortunate. You don't really want to celebrate people losing their job unless, it's for a good reason. And by good reason, I don't mean that they're bad. I mean other things. But it's probably best for both the organization and him if they just separate, and he can try to maybe manage somewhere else, and the Pistons can hopefully figure it out and go back to being a pretty decent team.
All right, I give you one thing that you could do. What's the next thing the Pistons need to do to get back on track?
Get some consistency. Get someone next to Cade who can help him score, and not someone like Jaden Ivey who like excels when Cade is kind of off the court, but someone who can play next to him. And that's not a slight at Jaden Ivey. It's just right now in their careers, they're not built to play next to each other. So hopefully with this fifth pick, they get someone who can help the offense and can maybe help defend on the wings as well.
Yeah, I feel like Jaden could do really well at a club with more pieces.
Yeah, and I really hate to say that because I don't want him to go. Not because of his play, although he's been playing pretty well, but like his backstory, his mother played with the Shock, his grandfather was an NFL player here. Like I want the guy who maybe isn't from here, but is from here to stay here. You don't really get many athletes from Detroit playing for teams in Detroit. I mean, I think the last one was Joik Bell. I know Abeldecker for the Red Wings didn't grow up too far away, but like you want to get people from here who understand here to stay here as long as possible. So I really hope they can figure out a way to make those two work, because that would be a real sad story to see him go on somewhere.
I mean, it's kind of the outer suburbs, but Aiden Hutchinson fits that bill.
Oh, I mean, I forget about him because he went to Divine Child. That rivalry is not going anywhere. Shouts out to the Cubs.
The shade that just drops in for reasons listeners then find out. I just absolutely appreciate Fletcher.
I mean, I'm all for the Catholic League, but of course there's always one in front of the rest.
Well, Fletcher Sharp, it's so good to catch up with you, man, on these stories around town and also some sports. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. And with that, we are done with your Daily Detroit for today. Don't forget to leave 5 stars in your favorite podcast app and tell a friend about the show. We really appreciate you. With that, remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit. Talk tomorrow. And the faith that you can achieve what's inside your soul. Someday when we get on high, our days we only can try.